They say you can't put a price on love. My parents did. $79,800 to be exact. That was the number at the bottom of the invoice they handed me at our so-called family meeting. An itemized bill for raising me, groceries, gas, even rides to school. Every moment of my childhood calculated like a debt to be repaid. At first I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. This isn't just a story about money. It's about control, favoritism, betrayal, and what happens when the kid who always kept quiet finally says, enough. Ethan Walker, 31, sat in his Portland apartment, tapping away at his laptop in a clean, minimalist workspace. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, bouncing off the hardwood floors. The buzz of productivity was interrupted by a text notification. He glanced at his phone, expecting a message from a client or a friend, but instead saw the cold, clipped words from his father. Family meeting, Sunday. Be here. Don't be late. He stared at the screen, unmoving, the corners of his lips tightening. After a long exhale, he shut the laptop and leaned back, silence pressing in around him. Sunday arrived with grey skies and a quiet hum of tires against damp pavement. Ethan drove through the familiar roads of Salem, his hometown. Quaint, static, suffocating. The Welcome to Salem sign passed by in slow motion. As his car approached his childhood house, his eyes lingered on the chipped white fence, the sagging front porch, the windows that once held stories, but today they held no warmth. Inside, the air was stale. George, his younger brother, lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. Their parents, Rick and Linda, sat at the kitchen table like they were hosting a business meeting. A yellow folder sat between them. "Sit down, Ethan," Rick said, voice steady but firm. "We have something important to discuss." Linda offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan sat cautiously. Rick opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. Ethan picked it up, expecting anything but what he read. Invoice, services rendered by parents to child. Total, $79,800. He blinked. A laugh escaped, bitter and confused. "You've got to be kidding me." Linda spoke softly but seriously. "Be grateful we're only charging you this much." Silence hung like fog. Ethan's eyes hardened, disbelief slowly giving way to fury. Rick leaned forward. "Raising a child is expensive," he said. "You have your own business now. You should give back." Ethan's voice dropped. "You didn't raise me. I raised myself." He reached for his wallet, pulled out a blank piece of paper instead of a checkbook, scribbled something, and slid it across the table. "I'll get back to you," he said, rising. And with that, he turned his back on a family that had just put a price tag on his existence. That night, Ethan lay awake in his apartment, the glow of the city outside his window doing little to settle the storm within him. Memories clawed their way back, vivid and sharp. 13 years old, he was stocking shelves in a corner store after school, saving every dollar to buy a pair of used Nike sneakers. Across town, George, 2 years younger, was unboxing a brand new pair of Adidas cleats, bought on a whim by their mother because he needs them for soccer. Ethan had said nothing. He had learned early that speaking up changed nothing. At 15, Ethan was grounded for 2 weeks after getting home 5 minutes past curfew. His father had shouted, "You need to grow up." The next year, George was caught sneaking beers with his friends in the backyard. Rick had chuckled, "Boys will be boys." Ethan's knuckles tightened around the edges of his blanket as the memories poured in. High school, while Ethan pushed himself for straight A's, securing a scholarship to the University of Oregon, George dropped out of college, twice. When neighbors asked, Linda waved it off with a smile. He's still finding himself. College isn't for everyone. Ethan never complained. He didn't know how. His 16th birthday haunted him the most. He had spent nearly a year working weekends and saving every penny to buy a beat-up used car. He showed his parents his savings account, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe they'd match him. Maybe just this once they'd say, "We're proud of you." A week earlier, George had turned 14. His parents gave him an Xbox Series X, no strings attached, no questions asked. On his birthday, Ethan's dinner was quiet. No cake, no surprise, just Rick looking over the numbers and saying, "We'll see about a car in a year or two. Let's see if you're ready for the responsibility." Ethan didn't argue, but he remembered the cold slice of silence, the way celebration had passed him by. They always saw him as fragile, he whispered to the darkness. And me? Disposable. Ethan sat in his car just outside his parents' home, the same driveway he'd parked in 100 times before, but today felt different. The invoice they had handed him still sat on the passenger seat like a silent accusation. He picked it up again, eyes scanning the numbers, each line more absurd than the last. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened a note titled, "What They Took." Moments later, he walked back into the house. His parents looked up, surprised. George barely glanced up from his phone. Rick leaned back, smug, as if expecting Ethan to cave. But Ethan didn't sit. Instead, he held out his phone and said calmly, "If you get to charge me for being your child, I get to charge you for being my parents." He began listing the numbers. 115,000. That's how much I wired you in 2017 when you said you were about to lose the house. Rick shifted in his seat. 20,000, Ethan continued, from my personal savings account. You said it was just a loan to help George get on his feet. Linda looked down. And 60,000, Ethan's voice dipped, from Grandpa's inheritance. I never saw a dime. You told me there was nothing left. Linda finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost pleading. You didn't need it back then. Ethan shook his head, eyes locked on hers. That's not the point. You never asked. No one replied. No one could. Ethan stood in silence for a moment, then said with finality, You don't get to bill me for existing. He walked out, no goodbyes, no guilt. Back in Portland, he sat down at his laptop and began pulling together folders, bank statements, digital receipts, years of financial records he had kept, out of habit or maybe self-defense. From overhead, he looked like a man alone, at war with something much larger than himself. But this time, he wasn't going to just survive it, he was going to fight it. Late at night, Ethan stared at his ceiling, his thoughts refusing to quiet. Finally, he grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Uncle Ray, he said softly when the line picked up, I need to ask you something about Grandpa's will. There was a pause, then Ray's familiar voice came through, weary but kind. I was wondering when you'd ask. Ray explained what Ethan had always suspected but never had proof for. Gerald Wilson had left an inheritance, split equally between Ethan and George. But Rick and Linda had told Ray that Ethan refused his share and somehow forged paperwork to make it look official. They didn't just steal my money, Ethan said, voice low and shaking. They stole my right to exist as family. The next morning, Ethan sat across from attorney Michael Dean in a sunlit office in downtown Portland. Michael reviewed the evidence. Emails, bank statements, text messages. One message stood out. From Linda. Thank you, we'll pay you back soon. Love, Mom. After scanning the files, Michael looked up and said plainly, You have a case, a strong one. They didn't just screw you morally, they broke the law. Ethan nodded. Without hesitation, he signed the paperwork to move forward with the lawsuit. Back in Salem, Rick was mowing the lawn while George played video games inside. The mailman arrived, handing Linda a sealed envelope. She opened it and froze. He's suing us, she whispered. From the living room, George exploded. He's actually insane! But Ethan wasn't insane. He was just done pretending everything was fine. The morning was crisp as Ethan stepped out of his car in front of the Marion County Courthouse. Dressed in a simple navy suit, he adjusted his tie with steady hands. His expression was calm, but his eyes were steeled with something unshakable. Resolve. Across the lot, Rick, Linda, and George approached from the other side. There were no greetings, no nods, just cold silence. Inside the courtroom, the air was tense. Ethan sat beside his attorney, Michael Dean, who methodically presented the evidence. First, the $115,000 bank transfer, clearly labeled family help with no repayment agreement. Then the email from Linda, Thank you, we'll pay you back soon, love, Mum. Finally, the forged inheritance waiver, compared side by side with Ethan's verified signature. The difference was blatant. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he stood tall and addressed the court, his voice unwavering. "I never asked to be born," he said. "I never signed up to be an investment. Everything I built on my own. And when they couldn't benefit from it, they tried to invoice me for being their son." Rick stood sharply. "We are the parents. We sacrificed everything for him," he barked. Linda, now tearful, looked at Ethan. "You've changed," she whispered. "You act like a stranger now." The judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. "This court finds the plaintiffs are owed repayment of all misused inheritance and financial assistance." Her gavel fell with a sharp, definitive thud. Outside the courtroom, George stormed past Ethan, his voice rising. "You ruined this family over some money." Ethan turned to him, calm. "No," he said. "I just stopped paying the emotional rent." That evening, the court's orders began to take effect. The Walker family was forced to sell their house, liquidate assets, and give up their cherished timeshare. The money they had taken so freely now came back with interest, both financial and emotional. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel like the burden. He felt free. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Ethan's Pearl District apartment, casting warm patterns on the floor. He sat alone at the dining table, holding a letter, handwritten, soft around the edges. It was from Linda. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know you were always worth it. We just didn't know how to show it." He read it twice, maybe 3 times, then he folded it gently, slid it into a drawer, and closed it. No bitterness, no vindication, just closure. Later that week, Ethan met Ray for dinner at a cozy bistro tucked between art galleries and bookstores. Over shared plates and quiet laughter, Ray raised his glass. "You didn't just win a case," he said. "You reclaimed your life." Ethan smiled, softly at first, then wider, fuller. It was the first genuine smile in a long time, one that didn't carry the weight of defense or exhaustion, just peace. As the evening faded into twilight, Ethan took a walk through Bush Park. Autumn leaves danced in the breeze, rustling underfoot. He stopped near a familiar house, once his childhood home. Now it belonged to someone else. New curtains in the windows, a different car in the driveway. He stood there a moment, hands in his pockets, the wind brushing past like an old friend saying goodbye. Then he turned and walked away without looking back. His voice echoed in narration, quiet, steady, final. "I didn't break this family. I just stopped pretending I belonged in it." Some debts aren't financial, some wounds aren't visible, and sometimes the hardest battles are fought not in courtrooms, but within the walls we once called home. Family isn't just blood. It's choice, respect, and the quiet understanding that love, real love, is never transactional. We all deserve to feel valued, not calculated. If this story made you reflect, feel, or even remember something personal, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your story, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true tales that dig deep, hit hard, and stay with you long after they're told.